Child abuse casts a long and horrifying shadow across our nation. It is a dark reality that many children face, often in silence and fear, unable to seek help or even understand the gravity of their situation. It is a silent epidemic, often hidden behind closed doors where the cries for help go unheard, and the pain remains unseen by the outside world. This epidemic leaves invisible scars on its young victims, scars that can last a lifetime, affecting their mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Sadly, every year brings new headlines, new cases that shock the conscience and remind us of the vulnerability of children. These stories are not just statistics, they are real lives, real pain, and real suffering. One such case, unfolding in the heartland of America in Farmington, New Mexico, has sent ripples of horror and disbelief across the nation. It has brought to light the dark underbelly of child abuse that exists even in the most unsuspecting places. This is the story of a 15-year-old girl held captive in a chicken coop, subjected to unimaginable cruelty at the hands of those entrusted with her care. Her plight is a stark reminder of the horrors that can occur behind closed doors. This case is not just about one girl's suffering, it is a stark reminder of the pervasive nature of child abuse and the urgent need for collective action. It calls for a society that is vigilant, compassionate, and proactive in protecting its most vulnerable members. We must remain vigilant, raise our voices against injustice, and fight tirelessly to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that no child suffers in silence. The children of our nation deserve nothing less. They deserve to grow up in a world where they feel safe, loved, and protected. We begin by shedding light on this horrific case, exposing the darkness, and demanding justice for the innocent. Only by confronting these harsh realities can we hope to create a safer future for our children. In the quiet town of Farmington, New Mexico, a shocking discovery unveiled a nightmare hidden in plain sight. This tranquil community, known for its serene landscapes and close-knit neighborhoods, was about to be rocked by a story that would leave everyone in disbelief. A 15-year-old girl endured months of alleged abuse at the hands of her guardians, Jamie Jackson, 59, and Patricia Madrid, 36. The young girl, whose identity is protected, faced unimaginable hardships that no child should ever have to endure. The details, as they emerged, painted a horrifying picture of cruelty and neglect. Neighbors and friends were stunned as the grim reality of the girl's daily life came to light. The victim's ordeal, as alleged by authorities, began in April 2024 and stretched on for an agonizing 5 months. Each day was a relentless cycle of fear and suffering, with no end in sight. During this period, the young girl was allegedly confined to a chicken coop for approximately 17 hours each day. This small, cramped space became her world, a place where she was cut off from the outside. This was not a temporary punishment, it was her daily existence. The coop, meant for housing animals, became a symbol of her isolation and suffering. The coop, meant for housing animals, became her prison, a symbol of her isolation and suffering. The conditions were deplorable, with the girl enduring extreme temperatures and unsanitary conditions. As the investigation unfolded, the full extent of the alleged abuse sent shockwaves through the community and beyond, leaving many to wonder how such cruelty could occur undetected for so long. The town of Farmington, once a symbol of peace, now grapples with the haunting questions of how this tragedy could have been prevented. The chicken coop where the 15-year-old victim was allegedly held was far from a suitable environment for a child. The structure was falling apart, with rusted wire mesh and a dirt floor that offered no comfort or protection. Exposed to the elements, she faced the scorching heat of the New Mexico sun and the biting chill of desert nights, often without adequate clothing. The harsh weather conditions made her situation even more unbearable, as she had no means to shield herself from the extreme temperatures. Basic necessities like proper food and water were allegedly withheld. The empty food and water bowls around her were a constant reminder of her dire situation, leaving her to fend for herself in an environment that was both physically and emotionally draining. While her siblings reportedly enjoyed regular meals, the victim was often left with only ramen noodles to eat, a meager and inadequate source of nutrition. This lack of proper sustenance not only affected her physical health, but also her mental well-being, as she watched others eat better meals. Even the most basic human dignity was allegedly denied to her. She was often seen sitting in the dirt, wearing tattered clothes that offered little protection from the elements, further highlighting the neglect she endured. The young girl was reportedly allowed to use the restroom only twice a day, forcing her to endure further humiliation and discomfort. This restriction added to her physical and emotional suffering, making her daily life a constant struggle. But the physical deprivation was just one aspect of the alleged abuse. The emotional and psychological toll of her situation was immense, as she faced constant neglect and isolation. The victim also reported being subjected to physical violence, including being hit and even having a gun pointed at her, instilling fear and helplessness in the young girl. The threats and violence she faced left her in a state of constant fear, unable to find any sense of safety or security. On September 16, 2024, a glimmer of hope pierced the darkness of the victim's ordeal. Child Protective Services, alerted to the possibility of abuse, requested a welfare check at the Farmington residence. This seemingly routine check would prove to be a turning point in the young girl's life. Upon arrival, law enforcement officers were met with a scene of neglect and abuse that confirmed their worst fears. The 15-year-old victim, found living in the deplorable conditions of the chicken coop, was immediately removed from the home. Her rescue marked the beginning of the long and arduous journey toward healing and justice. The evidence collected at the scene, along with the victim's harrowing testimony, painted a clear picture of the abuse she had allegedly suffered at the hands of her guardians. When confronted with the allegations, Jamie Jackson and Patricia Madrid offered explanations for the 15-year-old's treatment. They claimed that the girl was prone to outbursts, and that their actions were simply disciplinary measures taken in response to her behavior. However, their attempts to justify their actions were quickly contradicted by the mounting evidence. Text messages discovered on Jackson's phone allegedly revealed a pattern of abuse and corroborated the victim's account. These digital breadcrumbs provided a chilling glimpse into the control and manipulation allegedly inflicted upon the young girl. The evidence painted a starkly different picture from the narrative presented by the accused, further solidifying the case against them. On February 18, 2025, nearly 5 months after the victim's rescue, the wheels of justice began to turn. Jamie Jackson and Patricia Madrid were arrested and charged with 14 felony counts, including child abuse and conspiracy. Their arrest marked a significant step towards holding them accountable for the alleged abuse inflicted upon the 15-year-old girl. Following their arrest, Jackson and Madrid were booked into the San Juan County Adult Detention Center. However, they were later released, their release raising concerns about the potential risks they might pose to the victim and others. As the legal proceedings continue, the nation watches closely, demanding justice for the young victim and accountability for those who allegedly subjected her to such unimaginable cruelty. Adding another layer of complexity and concern to the case was the revelation of a previous child abuse charge against Patricia Madrid. In 2020, Madrid faced similar accusations, but the charges were ultimately dropped. The circumstances surrounding the dismissal of the 2020 case remain unclear, but the shadow of past allegations raises questions about potential systemic failures and missed opportunities to intervene earlier. The previous charge against Madrid adds a chilling dimension to the current case. It underscores the need for a thorough investigation into the history of both accused individuals and the systemic factors that may have allowed the alleged abuse to continue unchecked. The safety and well-being of children must be paramount, and any potential red flags in the past must be carefully scrutinized. The horrifying case of the 15-year-old girl allegedly abused and confined in a chicken coop in Farmington, New Mexico, serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance in child protection. Abuse can happen anywhere, in any community, and it often hides in plain sight. It is our collective responsibility to be aware of the signs of abuse and to speak up when we suspect that a child is in danger. We must create a culture where children feel safe to speak out about abuse and where adults are empowered to report suspected cases without hesitation. Schools, community organizations, and faith-based institutions all play a crucial role in creating a safety net for children. By working together, we can build a community where every child feels safe, valued, and protected. February 16, 2025, Oakland County, Michigan. A seemingly ordinary day, but behind the closed doors of a nondescript house, a scene of unimaginable horror was about to unfold. The authorities, responding to a welfare check request, had no idea of the nightmare they were about to encounter. What they found inside would shock the community and expose a deeply disturbing case of child neglect. Kelly Bryant, a 34-year-old mother, stood accused of abandoning her 3 young children to a life of squalor and isolation. The air was thick with the stench of decay as authorities entered the home. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of horrifying. Years of neglect had transformed this once livable space into a veritable wasteland. The walls, once painted with care, were now canvases of mold and grime. The floors, which might have once echoed with the laughter of children, were now buried under layers of filth and refuse. The floor, barely visible beneath mountains of garbage, was littered with rotting food, discarded clothing, and used diapers. Each step taken by the authorities was met with the crunch of debris underfoot. The air was thick with the smell of decay, making it almost unbearable to breathe. The sheer volume of waste was overwhelming, a testament to the years of neglect and abandonment. The walls were covered in mold, a testament to the years of neglect that had permeated every inch of the house. The mold had spread like a disease, creeping into every corner and crevice. It was a silent invader, slowly eating away at the very structure of the home. The sight of it was enough to make one's skin crawl, a visual representation of the decay that had taken hold. The stench of human waste was overpowering. The bathroom, a place meant for cleanliness and hygiene, was a cesspool of filth. The smell was so strong that it seemed to cling to the very walls, a constant reminder of the squalor that had taken root. It was a place where no one should have to live, let alone children. The toilet, overflowing and unusable, painted a grim picture of the conditions these children had been forced to endure. It was a stark reminder of the neglect and abandonment that had become their daily reality. The sight of it was enough to turn one's stomach, a visual representation of the filth and decay that had taken hold. The bathtub, meant for cleansing and comfort, was filled with feces. It was a sight that defied belief, a stark reminder of the neglect and abandonment that had taken hold. The very place meant for cleanliness had become a symbol of filth and decay. It was a place where no one should have to live, let alone children. The kitchen, meant for nourishment and family meals, was unusable. Its surfaces covered in grime and infested with insects. The very heart of the home had become a breeding ground for pests and disease. It was a place where no one should have to prepare food, let alone eat. The sight of it was enough to make one's skin crawl, a visual representation of the neglect and abandonment that had taken hold. This was not a home, it was a nightmare. A place where the very essence of life had been choked out by filth and neglect. The children who lived here had been forced to endure conditions that no one should ever have to face. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of neglect and abandonment, a visual representation of the decay that had taken hold. The authorities who entered this home were met with a sight that would stay with them forever, a reminder of the importance of vigilance and care. Huddled inside a bathroom, terrified and alone, were 3 children, a 15-year-old boy and his 2 younger sisters, aged 12 and 13. Their clothes, soiled and ragged, hung loosely on their thin frames. Their hair, matted and unkempt, spoke volumes of their desperate situation. Their eyes, wide with fear and uncertainty, reflected the trauma they had endured. Their long, unkempt toenails, a chilling reminder of the basic care they had been denied. They cowered, these children hidden from the world that had forgotten them, their only companions, the rats and roaches that scurried through the filth. They had never known the simple joys of childhood, the comfort of a loving touch, the security of a clean bed. For years, these children had lived in this nightmare, abandoned by their mother, forgotten by the world. Their only source of sustenance, the occasional bags of fast food left on the porch, a meager and unreliable lifeline. Their days were spent in darkness, hidden from the sunlight, deprived of education, their laughter silenced by fear and neglect. The girls, their young lives stolen, had not stepped outside the house in years. The boy, forced into the role of protector, bore the weight of responsibility for his sisters, his childhood stolen by the burden of their survival. He communicated with his mother through text messages, his pleas for help ignored, his cries for normalcy unanswered. The law, slow and often blind, had finally caught up with Kelly Bryant. For years, she had evaded justice, living a life that masked the horrors she inflicted behind closed doors. But now, the facade had crumbled, and the truth was laid bare for all to see. Arrested without incident, she now faces the consequences of her actions. The community watched as she was led away, a collective sigh of relief echoing through the streets. The arrest marked the beginning of a long journey towards justice for the victims. The judge, his voice echoing the outrage of a community, set her bond at a staggering $250 million, a clear message that such cruelty would not be tolerated. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. "Unconscionable," Sheriff Bouchard declared, his words heavy with anger and disbelief. He spoke of the tireless efforts of law enforcement to bring Bryant to justice, highlighting the dedication and perseverance of his team. Abuse of the highest order. The community, united in their outrage, held vigils and protests, demanding justice for the innocent children whose lives had been shattered. The empty playground stood as a stark reminder of the innocence lost. Prosecutor McDonald, her voice shaking with emotion, spoke of the unimaginable trauma inflicted upon these innocent children. She detailed the harrowing accounts of abuse, painting a picture of a nightmare that no child should ever have to endure, and vowed to seek the termination of Bryant's parental rights. The courtroom attendees, their faces etched with concern, listened intently as McDonald laid out the case against Bryant, leaving no stone unturned in her pursuit of justice. Life in prison, the harshest punishment, awaits if she is convicted. The prison walls, cold and unyielding, stand ready to house Bryant for the rest of her days, a fitting end for someone who inflicted so much pain and suffering. The community, though scarred, hopes for healing and justice for the innocent.